Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. Mark Moyer doing some great networking events to actually have an in-person event. If you're in the New York City area, American Whiskey on 30th Street. So check it out. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we welcome Neil Schwartz into the show. Welcome to the Wolff Den. How are
Matt,
you?
thanks for having me today. Looking forward to a nice, lively conversation.
Yeah, that's what we're all about here. For the people in the audience who don't know who you are, give us a quick intro, and then we'll get into it.
Sure, I am President and Chief Data Officer for SBRnet. I've had over 26 years of experience in the market research world, most of it devoted on the sports side. SBRnet is an aggregator of data. We provide data to about 240 colleges and universities around the country, actually around the world. As well as you know our own proprietary sports fan data, which is part of the data that we aggregate. But we are known as a data aggregator, collecting both proprietary data, our own, and other people's data, and then making it available in a variety of different ways.
Data is everything these days. I worked for a company called LexisNexis Risk Solutions, where that was, data was, it's a billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
In my world, in the ticketing world, data probably the key reason why everything is going digital and cashless, and keeping NFTs and so. How did you get into the data into the data business?
It's actually kind of interesting. Many years ago, I was actually working in cable TV, and my boss had asked me about a specific problem, and I wasn't really sure how to answer it. And I went out and tried to find some data that was out there that would allow me to help me answer the problem. And I've been hooked ever since, Matt. I like to talk to people about data driven, you can name it, decision making, strategic planning, sponsorship packages, ticket sales, you name it. Data can come in front of that sentence or that category. And, I've always been hooked on that process. It's, look, it's fact based. And, I love the facts.
I think I want to get into that, and we'll probably get into that a little bit more. I
Sure.
think data it's well, we can talk about it now. Data is very interesting. Is it facts? Because not all of it is. You're doing market research. Are people really telling you the truth? Are you getting the right stuff? Is the data accurate? So, again, with my LexisNexis background, good data in, good data out, bad
Yeah.
data in, bad data out. There's a ton of bad data out there. People are just lazy to clean it up or to revise, or they're just passing along. They're throwing stuff at the wall. So how do you differentiate between those companies out there, and what you guys are doing?
Matt, it's interesting because there are a lot of companies out there that do provide bad data. A lot of them have what they call the black box data effect. You don't really know where the data is coming from. And so it's really hard for you to be able to make a value judgment as to whether the data is good, bad, or otherwise. From my standpoint, I am very protective of the science that goes into the data that we provide and that we conduct. We ensure that we're using a scientific approach, that we're using a scientific, if it's a consumer study, that we're using a scientifically based sample. And we're really making sure that the groundwork or the foundation for what we do, Matt, has science behind it. And that's what's really important. It's got to have that science. In some cases, it means you use what they call quota-based sampling or model-based sampling. It doesn't change whether or not it's random, but what it does do is that ensures that you're collecting what you need to collect. I mean, you wouldn't build a bridge without building a model first.
Yeah.
So, you don't build a sample without building a model first. And that's what, we really pride ourselves in is the science.
Yeah, probably a lot of misconceptions about data and surveys, like the difference between, is it random, or is it, are you putting this out? Is it already biased just based on how you're putting it out there? And then the other thing is, like, I don't need 100,000 people to respond.
No.
In fact, once you get over, and that number is very low, it's only like a couple thousand, right? That it doesn't really matter one way or another whether you have 3,000 or 30,000 or 300,000.
In some cases, the bigger numbers are really not necessary. When you look at, and I don't want to get too sciencey, Matt, but when you look at, confidence intervals, and when you look at, you know, um, um, margin of error, it really doesn't change that much. I mean, if you look at the television sample over the years that Nielsen has used to decide on our television ratings, back when I remember I first started, I think it was like 1,100 families that were basically deciding what everybody got to watch, based on their Nielsen diaries. Now, those numbers have grown a little bit as the world has become a more complicated place, Matt. We've had to grow our sample sizes as we've gone from 3 channels to 5 channels to 50 to thousands. Literally, if you want to be able to get an accurate sample, you need to increase that sample size. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the data is always more accurate. And I think, that's why people come to me. They want to understand exactly, what data they think is best to use, why I think it's the best to use, and then how do I put it into practice? The thing that I like to talk about, and I teach a lot of classes, Matt, but the thing that I talk the most about is using data to tell a story. Because at the end of the day, if you're a businessman, you're a CEO, you're a head of marketing, you're in charge of sponsorships for the Miami Dolphins, you don't have time to do all the data mining, do all the work. Just come in and tell me a story about why your product, why your service, why your media outlet, why whatever it is that you want me to do, I should do it. Tell me a story.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that is I actually talked about this yesterday, is there's multiple stories that can be told from the same data in a lot of different ways. Some could be on one side or the other, like the glass is half full, the glass is half empty.
Yes.
They're both right?
Yes.
They're both factually correct.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of manipulation of data, and you're kind of using, I call it funny math, but you're kind of using it. It's just, how do we know what is? It's everything in context, obviously, but how do we know what to really believe if they're both true? Then what's the feeling of what we just heard?
Well, in any situation like that, you really have to look at the person that's doing the communication or the communicator. How much trust do you place in that particular person? Look, Matt, at the end of the day, it may always come down to relationships. Do you trust, that vendor? Do you trust that marketing person? Do you trust that data person? So I think at the end of the day, it does come down to trust. But I also think that one of the things that I've learned very early on, and this is something that I, again, talk to students about, or I even talk to my clients about, is don't overlay your own inherent biases on top of your insights or your opinions. Because you know what? A lot of times, we'll do that. We'll say, oh, I heard from one of my friends X, or I don't do that, so nobody else does. Well, as a general rule, when you use yourself as an example of what everybody else does, you are throwing in a massive inherent bias. And as a general rule, what you're saying is not fact. It's that old gut. I have a gut feeling. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that over the years, Matt.
Yeah. The other thing is, I always find interesting, and I talk about a measurable data. I want to talk about that, but there's a measurable data, but magazine subscriptions, right? Subscribers, how many people are subscribed? Well, yeah, I have 30,000 subscribers. Half of them don't even know I'm a subscriber, right? I mean, they give it to you for nothing so they can get all the advertising, all that. So how do you get people to understand that this number has bite to it? Like, say, we're getting this many eyes on it. Are you really? I don't know.
Well, Matt, a lot of times when you're presenting data, the one thing you've always got to also do is, validate it against something. It doesn't always have to be the exact same. I like to use the word tonnage versus trendage. It's kind of a little expression I made up. Tonnage. It doesn't matter whether you sold 1,000 of something or 10,000 of something, but it does matter what the trend is. Is the trend going up and is it accelerating, or is the trend going down as it is accelerating? You want to make sure that the data that you're presenting follows along with other data that's out there that you believe to have some scientific or validity. So we're always looking for that, the smell test, we call it, Matt. I always look at a piece of data and want to be sure it passes the smell test.
How do you, when you collect, are these surveys, you're talking about market research, which you've been doing forever.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of surveys. I participate in a lot of surveys. I find that they're not as flexible. They give me 4 answers. I choose this answer, but it's not really, it's just the closest to what I'm doing, but it might not even be that related to how I felt about whatever my answer would be if it was just fill in the blank.
Number one, Matt, is the way that a question is worded is really important in terms of being able to get at the answers that you want, or the answers that the survey taker is going to be able to kind of understand and be able to, check a box, just like you said. Well, I'm not here, but I'm not there. So which box do I check? And that does present some challenges. One of the things that we like to do, Matt, is we like to put in what I would call some test questions in there. So if somebody answered a question, let's say one way, well, I probably shoved the question in there that will validate that answer. So if they answered, let's say, question number 1, I'm using that arbitrarily, of course, with letter A, and then they answered, let's say, question number 16 with letter B, is that what is it the same, or are they answering one question one way and another question another, and the same question in another point in the survey another way? So we always,
that might just be by accident, because I remember I'm taking a survey and I'm like, I know it sounds familiar. What did I put for the one?
Sure.
I'm not going to take the time to go back 15 questions.
No. Matt, the other part of this is that when you're taking a survey or when you're using data based off of the survey, you want to look at what the majority of the people are doing, what's really happening, and not focus too much on the outliers. Yeah. There's always going to be outliers, no matter what. In fact, I talk, about this all the time, is that I'll even, in these days when people love to have their political discussions or really any discussion, they tend to focus on the outliers. Oh, I heard about this one incident. Well, it could be one incident out of a million incidents, which means it's not really very significant. So
what makes it a significant? What's a significant number? If I have, a few up here, and then as we get closer, that number goes out. Like, when does that become a data point that's worth, taking consideration of?
Well, Matt, now you're getting all sciencey on me. And, when we get all sciencey, we start to calculate things like standard deviation and then, off the mean or the median. And then how far away are we off of, the mean or median, with standard deviation? And then you're getting involved in doing things like multivariate regression analysis in order to be able to, determine how, one set of answers relates to another set of answers. So, it's always about, the science, Matt. And again, you know what? Math is math. 2 + 2 always equals 4, no matter what. So you have to always go back to the science, look at what the majority is doing, not focus on the outliers. And the other thing that's really important is, make sure that when you're measuring something, you've always benchmarked it. What is normal? What is the average?
Yeah. I think the benchmark is it's context is what it is, right?
Well, benchmark is really, an example is right now, in this year's study, we estimated that there were 143 million fans of the NFL. When we define a fan, we define someone as who watches or goes to games. Now, last year during the pandemic year, there were only around 124 million fans of the NFL because obviously nobody was going to games. So when you take that or factor that out, you do get a different look. But what we did was an example is that we looked at, let's say, the growth of the NFL year over year versus the growth for all sports. And in fact, the NHL has in fact over indexed or done better than that benchmark average. So we look at benchmarks a lot of times as a way to be able to determine, what's average what's above average than what's below average.
I mean, is that a big difference? The 130 to 180? Is that a big? It sounds like it's a big
It
difference.
is a big difference. It's
Yeah.
significant. And that's also one of the things, when you look at, let's say, a smaller sport, I look at, let's say, MMA with 42 million fans in 2021. When I look back on what they were, let's say the previous year, of course I have to look for it, but, again, you've got to look at the size of the sport, because let me tell you, it's easier to grow a smaller number than it is a bigger number. That's just, the law of larger numbers. So, there is, you always have to take a look at, what am I talking about? Look, if you grow the NFL by 10%, you're looking at 14 million fans. That's a lot of people, Matt. But if you're growing, let's say, tennis by 10%, that's only 5 million fans. Not as many.
But those 5 million fans, it depends on what they do. Those 14 million fans could just be people watching at a sports bar or watching at their home. And those 5 million fans, half of them could be going to the event. They could be playing tennis themselves, buying equipment. I mean, that's,
Now you're talking, though, about a whole new area that we've gotten into at SBRnet, where we measure what they call fan engagement.
Yeah.
We have this new measurement called the Fanverse. And what the Fanverse does, and it's kind of unique in the media world, because what we're doing is we're taking a look at, baseline audience measurement. And there's a lot of companies out there that provide baseline audience measurement, not just mine. But what we've done, Matt, is to create this engagement score. And we looked at 8 key categories in our fan data that represent what I would call engagement. Buying a ticket, putting your hand in your wallet to buy a ticket, buying licensed merch. Again, you're putting your hand in your pocket, taking out your credit card, making a concerted buying, gambling on sports. Again, the fan that gambles on sports, everything that we have seen in our data shows that people who gamble are much more engaged fans. People that travel, Matt. Matt, are you one of these guys that likes to go to some of the away games for some of your favorite teams?
Absolutely.
You are. I couldn't tell you the last away game I went to. And it might have been a Florida Gators game while my daughter was still at UF. I know you're also a UF grad.
Yeah.
But, I'm a Miami Dolphin fan. I talk about this all the time. I'm a Miami Dolphin fan. I was sitting on my couch Sunday, rooting, yelling, and screaming at the TV. My wife in the next room thinks I'm a total maniac. But I haven't bought any licensed merch of the Dolphins in years. I haven't traveled to a Dolphin game. I couldn't tell you the last time. I don't gamble on sports. So guess what? I'm a fan, but how engaged am I really? I'm
not dollar-wise.
No, I'm not engaged. I'm really not. I can sit on the couch and root all I want, yell and scream all I want, curse at the stupid play calls, whatever it is I want to do. But until I reach my hand out and grab that credit card, my level of engagement is going to be, I would say, passive.
But you also there's level of engagement with content. You consume a lot of content. It doesn't translate into dollars.
Well, that's why we also include social media usage into our engagement mix, as well as fantasy sports. It doesn't necessarily cost you any money to play fantasy unless, of course, you're in like 14 different leagues, and then it does end up costing you a lot. But again, you have made a purposeful decision, Matt. I've decided I want to participate in fantasy sports. I've decided I want to do something. It didn't take much decision for me to jump on the couch at 1:15 on Sunday and watch the Dolphin game. It really didn't. I just, I did it.
Well, still, people got to carve that stuff out on their day. If it's a Monday game, which they'll have, and Sunday night, or if it's a 1 versus 4, and what am I going to do? Does it take up the whole day? But yeah, it's not a big. By the way, I turned that game off, and we were at dinner, and someone said the Dolphins won. I thought they were kidding. I was like, no, they were down 3 touchdowns when I turned it off.
I've indoctrinated my 7-year-old grandson into the ways of the Miami Dolphins, and his father also was a Dolphin fan, originally from South Florida. So, we're watching the game. He loves to text me or FaceTime me. They call me the Grand Poobah. So he called me at the beginning of the game, and then the score got to be like 34 to 14. And he's like, Poobah, I think I'm going to stop watching the game. And then all of a sudden, the they start scoring touchdowns, and all of a sudden I'm getting texts from him. I'm getting, FaceTime from my 7-year-old grandson, and it was wild, Matt. But again, here's the point. Whether the game was on at 1, 4, Monday, Thursday, Wednesday, whatever, those are kind of outlier, when the game is. What's important is how engaged am I really?
Well, what about do you buy your grandson anything?
Well, I did buy my grandson a jersey last year when they drafted, 2 years ago, I guess, when Tua was drafted. And then, of course, I had to buy my 4-year-old grandson one too. But
Yeah.
I didn't buy it for me. I
They don't
didn't
care
buy
who
it
you
for me.
buy it for.
Well, Fanatics doesn't care who you buy it
Well,
for.
nobody, they don't know.
But again, do I consider myself an engaged fan? The answer is probably not, because most of my engagement is passive.
But the Dolphins would consider, hey, bought a jersey 2 years ago, bought another one this year. I think he's middle of the ground. They wouldn't necessarily consider you passive.
Well, I think if I, number one, if I bought it 2 years ago, I don't think that would really be a factor. And the other thing is, frankly, Matt, that, I don't gamble, I don't go to games, I don't travel, I don't post things on social media even. I'm not like, hey, what a great Dolphin game. I don't do that either. Occasionally, I actually will post about the Florida Gators, because that really gets me frustrated a lot of times. Ever since my daughter was there during the Tebow years.
Yeah.
So I learned to expect some greatness out of the Gators. But I think we look at this passive engagement, which by the way isn't bad, versus active engagement, which is better. And that's really
what you share. If you saw something cool for the Dolphins, people who like the Dolphins and the Gators. Do you share that with other people?
Usually not.
You don't.
Usually not. No, I could not be counted on for that. The only thing I do get into is there's a friend of mine who lives in the community where I live. I know we both live in South Florida, by the way, but I will. There's a a friend of mine who's a Jet fan, and we love to get on each other's case about the Dolphins Jets. And he always like, hey, come to the Jet game with me and all that. And again, I never do, because I'm just not that engaged. So, again, I'll watch it. I'll sit on the couch. I'll root for them. But you know what? I'm not really reaching into my pocket to spend any money.
Yeah. What are the colleges wanting to know? You talk about all the colleges. What do they want to know? What's important to them right
now? Right now there's really two subjects that I'm hearing a lot of, or actually three from colleges. Number one is this issue about sports gambling, Matt. I don't think you can have a discussion lately about any sports, professional, college, or otherwise, that doesn't involve sports gambling.
It's pretty annoying. I'm not a gambler anymore. It's very annoying to see how gambling intensive ESPN's coverage and content is.
Well, like an example, Thursday Night Football, Amazon Prime and the NFL did a deal with DraftKings. And, I watched the game. I have to say, Matt, I partially agree with you. Parts of the game were almost unwatchable with all the, gambling, split screens and all that kind of thing. And, I don't find that to be something that really interests me. But, gambling right now is just a huge business. The gambling companies are throwing out incredible amounts of money to gain new customers, just incredible amount. And
the gambling companies don't lose money.
Well, I haven't seen it or heard of it yet. And look, you know what? We're not even, halfway through the opening quarter on this gambling issue, because there's still, I think it's only legal. Online gambling is only legal in about 23 or 24 states, or I should say operational. I think it's legal in like 30.
Yeah, it's not legal in Florida. And if the geolocating that they have, I literally can take my phone and bet in New Jersey, but I can't. If I bring that same thing here, they know, and you can't bet. The people who want to bet, they bet. It's not hard to find.
Again, anecdotal story. A couple friends of mine are Wall Street guys, Wall Street bros, as my friends like to call them. They would literally, on a Thursday or Friday, get on the PATH train, go over to Jersey, make sure their phone gets geolocated to Jersey, place their bets, their sports bets in Jersey where it was legal, and then go back to work on Wall Street.
That's why it's so silly. Gambling, marijuana. Like you can literally go to I was just in Kentucky. I flew into Kentucky to go to Cincinnati.
Hmm.
And you can literally be in 3 states within an hour to do whatever it is that you want to do. So it seems kind of so the sports gambling is it's not going away. It's only going to get stronger and more popular. But I think did you ever watch the Tim Donaghy the
Yes,
Netflix?
yes, I did. I watched it on Netflix. Yes,
It's
scary.
hard to think that some of these. I was at the Bengals game against the Steelers week 1, thinking that this game was fixed. I'm like, there's no way this game's not fixed. I'm watching it. I'm like, this is a fixed game. And I don't think it was, but who knows?
Man, I worry about integrity. I really do. I mean, maybe that's just part and parcel inherent to being a baby boomer, but I worry about the integrity of the game. I lived through over the years a number of scandals. I mean, and, I just think that, the last thing you want to be able to have to do is sit there and watch a game, go to a game and wonder, did somebody get to that quarterback? And because it's easy to, it's easy to convince a quarterback to throw a pass over the head of his receiver or anything. And I really worry. And I also worry about the involvement of these gambling companies on college campuses, which by the way is out there. There's about 5 or 6 schools, Matt, that have already created deals with online gambling companies to promote, online gambling within the confines of intercollegiate sports. And I mean, you could literally now, Matt, there are kiosks in
Yeah.
the University of Colorado at Boulder Stadium where you can place bets. I'm not sure which one of the vendors they've done their deal with, but that's really where things are headed. I know it, look, I was a parent too. I am a parent. What am I talking about? I would have worried that, my kid might gamble away all, his tuition money.
Yeah, I played fantasy football when I was in high school. I actually took bets when I was in high school.
Me too, actually, in college.
Yeah, and it was I had a book, and it was a whole big thing. And my father caught me, but sort of not anyway. So it's been around. We've been doing it when you're younger, but the access to it and it's just becoming a blur as part of the game for me. I don't, it's like I said this the other day. The gambling companies are telling you to gamble responsibly as they take whatever money you want to give them, casino or sports betting. The tobacco companies put all the warnings on it, but they know that doesn't matter. And the alcohol companies serve you millions of drinks and tell you to drink responsibly. So it's a tough. It's very easy to have a problem.
It's a little bit of a conundrum also in a lot of ways. I mean, number one is that, these folks are trying to make money. We do live in a capitalist society. But I also wonder though, really what kind of safeguards there are. We did it in our survey when we looked at sports gambling. I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say like 11-12% of all people that sports gamble are actually under the age of 18. So, I may have gotten the actual number wrong. I probably should have had it handy, but I didn't. But it's just, it's scary to me, that, no matter, look, anybody who wants to defeat the system, whether it's, look, Matt, did you have a fake ID when you were in college?
I did, yeah.
I didn't need one because when I went to school, I was in New York, and the legal age for things was 18. But you had a fake ID. You know what? My daughter's going to hate me for this, but I know she had a fake ID, and I know all her friends had fake IDs.
Yeah.
So what's to prevent somebody with a fake ID, has their own credit card in their name, being able to go establish an account? My daughter would, let's say she drove to. I'm going to say, I don't think it's legal in Alabama, but let's say Georgia. Actually, I don't think it's legal in Georgia either. But, drives to a state where it's legal, could easily open up an account, place her bets and whatever, and then,
These
go
days,
about her
everyone
business.
I have friends that could put bets. I had a friend who was betting with a bookie offshore, and I probably threw a bet once in a while with it. It's just, it's the other thing about if we bring it back to the data side.
Yeah.
If you talk about gambling, if you talk about alcohol, you talk about sex and drugs, how honest are people going to be when you're asking them questions about that? Me, I don't care. What do I care? But there's a lot of people who won't be honest about that type of questioning.
That's an interesting point, and I think psychologists have looked at that, and sociologists, by the way, have looked at that particular phenomenon for years. In an anonymous situation, you would not believe how honest people are. When I know that there's nobody, can track me down, in any way, shape, or form, guess what? I don't. I'll be honest. I'll tell people because I know that by telling people and being honest, that it's going to help them make better decisions, which will hopefully be better for me. Hopefully.
Well, that's the idea: is that the better information everyone starts to get, the better offerings and services and products and service that will come back to us. Um, I don't really know what's anonymous these days anymore. I mean, what is anonymous?
Well, look, we can get into all this privacy stuff and everything else. Look, the closest most people can get to you is your zip code. I would defy anybody try to be able to, take, answers or responses that come from my household in this zip code and then be able to say, oh, that is, I'm not going to give my address out, but, that is coming from this address. Now, does it not mean that there are some unscrupulous data providers or data vendors out there that are, currently pinging my cell phone and probably know exactly what I'm doing,
Well, there are
here in my house?
breaches. I mean, Equifax had a huge breach.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even through nefarious behavior.
I mean, I just got a breach from one of the universities that buys our data that, they had a data breach. Luckily I didn't have any reason to worry, but, again, there are some bad people out there, Matt. And there are some bad people out there that want to steal your data so they can steal your money. And, look, you've got to protect yourself. I mean, from a data standpoint, we make sure that we protect our data. We use, a reputable cloud service. I personally use a VPN, when I'm doing things. But, again, nobody can protect themselves from anything, man. It's just, that's an illusion.
Yeah. What does a program look like with SBRnet? I mean, if someone wants to find information to gather data,
Sure.
get some research, what does it look like on the low end?
Sure.
And, your wheelhouse, really.
Sure. So, SBRnet, again, is all about providing data, but mostly what we do is we provide a subscription that allows you to access all of our data. So, I don't want to have to, I don't want to have to be there fulfilling, hey, I want data on college football, or I want data on these 5 schools, or I want data. Recently, one of the major soft drink advertisers, I won't mention who it was because they would be unhappy with me, but they wanted to know in a particular market like Kansas City, what kind of fan crossover do we have, let's say, between the Kansas City Royals and the Chiefs? Can I buy one or the other and get 80% of coverage of that market? So it ranges anywhere, but generally, Matt, people buy our data as a subscription.
Okay.
It usually starts, at the low end of subscription price around $2,000, goes up to over $8,000, depending on how much data you want, and things like that.
But so not so much custom in the sense of you creating either the questions or getting that, but some of that stuff can be done through filtering, I assume.
Yeah, there's look, we do custom research for people. We did a survey about a year ago for a major footwear manufacturer that wanted to understand a little bit more about sustainability. So while we were able to give them what they call some good secondary research or some good, low level stuff from our data, they wanted to go a little deeper. They wanted to know, do people really care about sustainability? Are they paying attention to sustainability? I saw you make a face there. Are they?
Yeah, I mean, I am and I'm not. I go to Tortuga Festival, which is all about preserving the ocean, and these people just throw stuff everywhere and they don't even care.
The big problem, if off on a tangent about, the whole sustainability issue, is that people think that recycling and sustainability are, are the same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
they are two words that are traveling down the same track, but they do not go to the same place.
Yeah.
But, it's very interesting that, when you do these surveys, but, look, a lot of people also want want the insight or want to be able to, they want to know what I know. So they want to know, what do I see in the data? So when you want to come to me and you say, look, here's what we want, but we also want you to add your insights. We want you to add your analysis. We want you to do, some different things with it. We also provide that. We do charge for it on an hourly basis, but I have a group of analysts that work with me. And depending on what it is that they need or want, I'll assign the particular situation to one of my analysts. Um, I'd love to believe that I'm as savvy as a lot of the younger analysts that I've hired, but boy, would that be a lie. Because let me tell you, the kids that are coming out of school now, Matt, are just so much more data savvy, so have skills that I could never have dreamed of. And I still have a tough time, dreaming about some of these skills. I am constantly amazed at the skill level of many of these students that are coming out of school.
What do you know or think about, like the 538s of the world, the predictive analytics, which is derived by data, right, and statistics? I guess because people are using your data
Yeah, no,
to
you're right.
predict,
You're
right?
right. Well,
They're just not putting it out there.
yeah. So here's a situation, but I also, I was very careful when I gloated about it to make sure that I kind of threw up a little bit of a disclaimer there. But earlier last week, we put out a social media post that our analysts and I agreed with their conclusion that the NFL as well as Amazon Prime would suffer in the short term in terms of viewership for Thursday night football. We looked at the data, we looked at the streaming habits, we looked at all of the different things that would go into that particular type of analysis. And we came away with looking at it saying that there is just no way that Amazon Prime was going to be able to deliver the audience size that they were able to get, with the NFL packages or even some of the NFL streaming services. And you know what? This morning, the data came out that they were way off on their projections. They were way below. Streaming, just did not produce and underperformed. We had that prediction made last Tuesday or Wednesday as we were looking at the data. Now, look, as I told somebody this morning, I said, look, the prediction business is a dangerous business. So, Matt, if I'm right 60% of the time, am I good at my job, or am I good at am I right 50% of the time? Am I good? I know a baseball player that can hit a ball 50% of the time, would be
Well, that's why
making.
I say the numbers are, hey, he struck out, 70% of the time, but he got a hit. You're a Hall of Famer.
Well, but also, that's one of the reasons why baseball is a great example. We do not collect and we do not provide data on athlete performance, player performance, and team performance necessarily. We're all about the business of sports. But here's a good example. Over the last, I want to say, few years, baseball has developed a number of new measurements. The OPS is a good example. The on base plus slugging, was a real good example of how you evaluate, a player's, value when it comes to getting on base. And, people, what they do is they look at the data that's available, they look at what's required from that data. And then, some smart people do some smart things, Matt. I'd love to believe that I'm smart too, but no, am I always right? The answer is no. If I was, I'd be a gazillionaire living, up in Palm Beach, on the Palm Beach Islands somewhere. But, look, there's two things: good data plus good analytics and good experience with it. I probably do better than average, and I'll, what, and that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, better than average is pretty good. Is data something that needs to be scrubbed, clean,
Yes.
revisited annually?
Yes. Even
Every
more
year?
often. I mean, there are some people that look at data daily. There are some people that look at data weekly. There are some look at monthly, and there are some that are looking at it on an annual basis. There's some data you don't have to look at for 2 years because it just doesn't change that much.
And the census is how often? Every 4 years?
Well, the census is actually the big census is every 10 years,
Yeah.
but every year they provide what they call projections, based off of the previous census, and then, and then again, using science and predictive analytics, predictive algorithms, in order to be able to predict where they think it will happen. Do they think, something will accelerate, decelerate, that kind of thing. So, but the big census is done every 10, but every year, I forgot who does, I guess it's Department of Commerce, puts out, I think it is, they put out their annual kind of update to the census.
What's the future of data? Is AI involved in data?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right now, I think you've hit upon it. I think there's a couple of initials that we've all heard out there. One is definitely AI. AI can do what 20, 30, 50 times faster than what a human being can do. It's just
when it's programmed by humans to do what it's
well,
supposed to do, right? So it does take some time to get that right.
it does go, Matt, get back to what I said earlier. It does get back to a matter of trust.
Yeah.
Do you trust the guy pulling the levers, back there? And if you trust that guy pulling the levers, then, chances are, the algorithms that they're producing, you can trust. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't verify. It doesn't mean you shouldn't validate. It doesn't mean you shouldn't back test, because all of those things are the ways that you can tell, if that data, if that AI is measuring what you think it will. But AI is the future. But there's something else, Matt, that's out there that's really getting my attention. And it's called natural language processing. And what it does, unfortunately, is it talk about being invasive. They are now able to scrape social media and be able to literally, from what they call natural language processing, be able to draw a value judgment. If Matt Wolff, for instance, goes to a movie and says he liked that movie versus Matt Wolff went to that movie and said he loved that movie, they're able to place a value statement or a numerical value judgment on that, and then which would allow them to better understand you, Matt Wolff, or me, Neil Schwartz. So, natural language processing, more and more, it's taking what we say and turning into a quantitative value judgment, which in my opinion can be a little bit scary, because let's face it, there are some people out there that just put some bizarre stuff out on social media. But again, the AI and the combination of AI and natural language processing, are really changing the world of data analytics, and data retrieval. So it's cool stuff.
I mentioned a measurable data earlier, and I'm big on that because I just think there's so much out there that we can't calculate, and it's very obvious why people don't want to talk about it, because you can't put a number on it.
Well,
that's
Matt,
the background of social media is, I post something, someone sees it, they click on it, their whole network can see it, someone from their network can see it, or all the times, like when I talk about this, I love this thing, I got it from Sticker Mule. It's great. It's like a fathead. It looks great.
I like it.
It's great. Sticker Mule.
I'm going to check them out. I've never heard of
that. No idea. They could get 100 orders from this one show. And
I'm going to look it out. I'd love to have one for SBRnet. We have a great looking logo, so I'd love to have that. I love your logo. But Matt, I want to get back to something you just said. When I first got into data, I remember I've listened to a lot of people that I felt were smarter than me, because I always thought that, that was important. And one person that was really a lot smarter than me, who had worked for a number of large corporations, worked for a number of consumer packaged goods, and you talk about people that know how to use data. But the one thing he always told me that has never gotten away from me is that you can't monitor what you can't measure. Right. You don't know if you can't monitor if, to say something's doing good, bad, or otherwise. Well, what's the measure for that? How are you deciding if that's good, bad, or otherwise? And again, it gets back to, if you can't measure it, you can't monitor it.
But
And
they
that's
also,
always been
yeah, but they try to. They do try to measure it. Like, and I'll give you an example.
sure.
When I talk about immeasurable data, I talk about the fact that I used to give money to an organization. I give not a lot, $100, whatever it is,
Hmm.
every year, and then
Hmm.
I got a bad feeling from that organization. The next
Hmm.
year, when they sent me the thing, I ripped it up and I threw it in the garbage.
Hmm.
Now, to them, that's going to be like, oh, he didn't give it. Well, maybe it was the pandemic. Maybe it's the environment. Maybe he's moved locations. They're going to put some type of assessment and not really know that I didn't do that because I was angry with them. And then also, what other actions did I have? Now, if I'm a sports fan, I'm probably not going to cancel my season tickets, but there's certainly other actions that I can do
Well,
that they're going to have no idea what they are, but they will assign a reason to it.
Well, Matt, the thing is also, I always talk to people is that don't use just one data set as your way to determine, make it, use multiple data sets. There are multiple places where Matt Wolff or Neil Schwartz, are represented in data. And, you might make a decision, as you said, to not support a particular charity or particular cause. Your mind may have changed up just because you didn't like their new philosophy, or you didn't like their new executive director, or you didn't like some other people that were contributing. Some of those things may be difficult to find, but what wouldn't be difficult to find is that we know. Matt, how old are you? Can I ask?
46.
Okay, so Matt Wolff, 46 years old, lives in South Florida. I don't know what your income is, but went to the University of Florida. They would find people just like you and then try to see how they were, how they reacted, how they, in a particular situation. And they will, and in a lot of cases, what they'll do is they'll overlay their opinions on top of yours, which you and I both know is an assumption that is flawed from the get go,
Yeah.
but it's really the only way that they
It's
can
what they
make.
can do. I think
Yeah.
I think the world or the companies, they're too reliant on data, and I know that doesn't
Oh,
sound.
come on. That's a knife through my
I
heart.
know they need it. I think
Oh,
it's necessary, but I also think, again, using separate sets of data or even just separate philosophies on things to treat people like people and not just a number.
let me tell you
Because
a
we're all
quick
so different.
no,
We're all so different.
we are. But again, it gets back to a lot of my things. Don't overlay your own opinions and what you do, your habits and behaviors on top of everyone else. But I do love to tell this little story. When I first started in the data world, I went to see a major sporting goods manufacturer. And I'm not going to say the name, but they were major. They were a name that everybody knew. And once a year, I used to go in and I would sit with the vice president of marketing, and I'd sit with the director of sales and the vice president of sales and all these, C-level or just below C-level people. And one year, the CEO joined us, who I happen to know. And we're talking about some things about the top selling products in a particular category. And this particular CEO was like, well, I went out and I talked to a bunch of managers at Dick's Sporting Goods, and they told me this product is flying off the shelves and it's doing really well and all that. I showed him a list, let's say, of the top 100 selling products based off of factual point of sales data. And I said, I don't see that product anywhere on this list. So are you basing your gut level? Are you basing your decision on the anecdotal stories from a bunch of managers at Dick's Sporting Goods? And he got a little mad at me at the time and all that, but I saw a bunch of heads nodding, from the director of sales and from the head of product development and from the head of marketing saying, you know what? He's right. We had some issues. We had some supply chain issues. We had an issue with the manufacturer, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? Again, Matt, it always comes back to the data. It just does.
But it's hard
And
to find, like, why did this sell? Why didn't this sell? Can we get an accurate
well,
answer on that in a wider scale? We could have our theories.
of course.
That's the important part of trying to read the data. Is the data good? How do we interpret the data? And are you going to interpret it in a fair way?
But
Because you can interpret the data that makes it look good for you because that's your job, right? You got to make that number look good. And I go right in using that same number and be like, it was terrible.
But some things, see, but that's what you just did though, is you overlaid your opinion on top of, the other value judgments. Some things are indisputable. For instance, let's just say you have 100,000 followers on social media. Well, you've got 100,000 followers. Are they all engaged? Are they all great followers? Probably not. But again, there are some things, Matt, when I would show somebody point of sales data, so data that comes directly from a cash registers, that data is factual. You sold X number of units of product, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That was my demo UPC code on that. But again, I used to get these questions all the time. I was very involved on the point of sales side for a long time. I used to get calls from everybody on sneakers. My daughter calls me the oldest living sneakerhead, but I used to really I used to have all of the data when it came to sneaker sales, apparel sales, whether it was for Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, even, look, I go back to Reebok. I even go back further than that to Converse, truth be told. But again, if you sold X number of units at X number of dollars, it equals Y number of total dollars. So some things are just indisputable, Matt. And, you may not want to believe it. You may not like it.
No, that number is true, but my 100,000 followers, I could buy 100,000 followers in a week.
Well, that's why, Matt, we've gotten into this whole engagement thing. Yeah, you've got 100,000, but if, let's say, only 10% are engaged,
you see that easily. Like, you got 100,000 followers, but every time you post, there's like 100 people commenting.
Yes,
Something's up.
But you could go to somebody else who's got 1,000 followers, and 50% of those people are engaged. So you've got 500 people who are actively engaged versus your 100 people.
I think you have an uneducated consumer. I talked about this on the show, uneducated consumer, which makes people, they don't go that deep into the numbers when they're looking at it. They just see what's on the surface or what people are telling them or what they see on the ranking list, which is, that's another thing you got to do. Is, again, going deeper into the numbers. What does that data mean?
Look, man, I'm guilty of doing this probably as much as you are. I don't know if you're married, but I'll go into a store. I'll walk into Best Buy. I'll look at, let's say, a new television. Before I buy it, or before I even consider it, what's the first thing most people do? What's the first thing you do?
Well, I'd look at the price on it.
Okay, but let's say when it comes to researching it or looking, first thing I do is I go look at product reviews. Now, I know that some of those reviews are going to be setups. I realize it. But I go look at what other people say or do. I look at how many people gave bad reviews versus good reviews. I look at, they like to rank reviews from 0 to 5 or 1 to 5. I like to look and see how the rankings are. If I see something that has a lot of bad reviews and a low ranking, you know what? I'm probably not going to buy that product.
Yeah. No, my wife is big on the reviews.
Is she?
Yeah.
I am too. I'll go to Costco. I've had people yell at me because I'll stand in front of an item. I'll put the UPC code in. I'll look it up on Amazon. I'll look it up somewhere else. So hey, I'm trying to get over here. I'm like, hey, I'm just, give me a break, dude. I'm just trying to do my due diligence here before I spend my $500.
Yeah. No, I get it. It makes sense. What's missing in the data world? What do you wish was better in the data industry?
What do I wish was missing? I think right now, the funny thing is nothing missing, but I think we're overloaded with data in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's really tough for people to, segregate or to classify data, good, better, best. Is this data good? Is it better? I think we're overloaded with data. I think at some point, you reach I had a boss that used to use this term, analysis by paralysis, or maybe I got it backwards. But the point is that if sometimes you're looking at too much data, you can't make a decision. Just give me a decision based on the data that you have that you think is reliable, and that's how we'll go.
Yeah.
You're not going to be right 100% of the time. Nobody is.
No, that's trial and error.
You bet. Well, And
trial and error in a way.
maybe data-driven trial and error.
Yeah, data-driven trial and error. We're going to let you out of the Wolf Den with the same question we let everyone out with. You can spend 24 hours with anyone in the world. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you choose, and what would you guys do?
Ooh. Only one person?
I mean, if it's like a band
Well,
or something.
I have to say I would probably the person who interests me the most, I think, would be somebody. People laugh, but I would love to play 9 holes of golf with President Obama.
Okay.
I think he's a cool dude. I would love to get out there and play 9 holes or 18 holes. I have this thing where I ask people if you could put together your dream foursome.
Yeah.
I'm a golfer. So what would it be? But I think if I had to narrow it down to one, I'd love to spend some time with President Obama and kind of understand. I'd love to pick his brain on what he really thinks about certain things.
Yeah.
I've
That
just
would
always
be.
found him to be a cool guy
And
and
I think he's
educated.
230 episodes. I think he's the number one choice we've had.
Really
I gotta go. I think he is. He'd probably be mine, and then maybe like Jason Bateman is another guy for
cool
me.
dude.
I would love, but Obama, I'd play some hoops with him, sit and listen to some music, talk. I think it'd be a great. It would be great to if you can get someone to really open up to you and no one has to worry about consequences of what is said or
Here's my dream foursome though: me, Tiger Woods,
okay.
Barack Obama, and Charles Barkley.
Barkley. Yeah. I'd love to get Barkley on the golf course.
I wouldn't gamble with him. He's a big gambler.
I know
I'd
he's
stay
big,
away from that.
Barkley would put about a lot of money per hole. Well, great to chat. It's a lot of great information here. Check out sbrnet.com for more information on how you can get better data, and that's really what it's all about. There's nothing worse than having bad data,
Yep.
and you got to be careful because data is expensive. So if you're
Yep.
paying a lot of money for bad data, you might not even find out until it's too late, and now you got to
And bad data can lead to expensive mistakes, and nobody wants to make an expensive mistake. Hey, Matt, I want to thank you for inviting me into the Wolf Den today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. A lot of great stuff, and hey, I'd love to come on again at some point in the future.
Yeah, we'll see what's happening down the road when the next big thing comes here. We got more episodes of the Wolf Den this week, so tune in and have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil.